The following is a conversation with Pam Dunn. Pam is a life coach, the CRO of Your Infinite Life training and coaching company, and a good friend. CRO stands for Chief Responsibility Officer, and that's exactly what Pam is. She is the person who takes responsibility in her life, making sure she's living with purpose and intention and with great inspiration. Pam is a great friend of mine and my wife. I met her in 2022. My wife knew her for years before that. And since then, she's been a true guide for me and my wife, for our marriage and for our life. I am so happy to be able to have this conversation with Pam, a conversation I wanted to have for a while, to really get deep into what she's about, what her philosophy on life is, and about what her intention is in all the healing that she's done for the Jewish community. And I hope that you watch this and are inspired as well. This episode is sponsored by Your Infinite Life training and coaching company. More about them later in the show. I heard a rumor down the grapevine. Let's start with that.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
I heard that a lot of a big reason as to why you got into the healing world specifically for the Jewish community has to do with a bigger, almost like purpose of yours to heal trauma from the Holocaust. Is that true?
It is true. I think it unfolded once I got involved, but I realized, because we started working with teens, that I could see that they were a generation that were trying to separate themselves from trauma and from their parents' traumas. And so I realized that the more that we got involved, that the work that we were doing was really assisting people in changing their generational legacies. And that, what a great community to do this in. And that, for so many years involved in the Holocaust, when that was going on, nobody from the Jewish community got to really acknowledge who they truly were. They were dismissed for that. And so it would make sense that for the generations after that, they wouldn't be able to acknowledge who they were. They would have to be dismissive and diminishing of that. And so to start this process, no matter what generation we're in, to start the process, then it would heal the generations before them and the generations after them.
There's a lot there. I want to two things. First of all, when you say that they were not acknowledged for who they are, you're talking about people during the Holocaust.
Yes.
Can you go into that a little deeper? All right, people were killed. It was like a total destruction of a whole people, and the way you're putting it is that they were not acknowledged for who they are. Can you
Well, I think the whole process. I mean, I don't want to be dismissive of it. I actually think it's pretty immense that the whole thing wrapped around a misunderstanding or just an unwillingness to see that these were people, with beautiful souls and beautiful hearts and wise minds, no matter what age they were. And they were totally dismissed for that. They were made to be looked at or portrayed as somebody that they weren't.
I never thought of it like that. To the point where it's it's a generational trauma of not knowing who you, not being acknowledged for who you are.
Mm-hmm. And actually, yeah, I mean, even being killed for who you are.
Oh, okay, interesting. Because now I'm thinking 1 second. Because it seems like they were acknowledged for being Jews, and that's why they were killed.
But that's the misunderstanding.
What do you
because
mean?
They were only acknowledged for whatever this person or this group of people thought that Jews were. They weren't looking at, when I meet someone who is a Jew, I meet someone who is a Jew, but you have a whole personality and a whole way of being and a brilliance and a magnificence that it is about who you are as a person. and you're Jewish. But they were lumped into a whole different category.
I want to unpack this because it's fascinating what you're saying, coming from the background that I have. See, in the background that I have, being Jewish is everything that you are. Being from the family of Jacob and having the history that we have, that is who you are. But it sounds like you're saying that it's not just that, there is another part. Can you go into that a little more?
Yeah, I think that's that's who I believe that's true too. Like, I love that. I love that about Judaism. Is that anchoring and that belief so solidly in that this is who we are. And also, each person has an individual gift or brilliance or magnificence that they bring to a relationship, a friendship, the world in how they express themselves. So that's what I'm saying, that it's more like, in addition to, who you are as a Jew, you also bring this, because even in the Jewish community, there's so much uniqueness amongst each individual.
That's very special. Can you, so you said that it not necessarily something that you started out with, but
Right.
something that, an understanding that you had once you started working with teens. Can you, describe a bit of what that shift was like that epiphany almost? What was that? Bring me through, the thought process there.
Yeah. Gosh, it was so long ago.
How many years ago?
I started doing the work in 2002. So, it wasn't right away, of course. But I would say it was probably that moment. What I'm remembering is there was this period of time where we were only working with teens. And after every teen course, we were meeting all the parents, because the parents would come up and pick up their teens. And it was just lovely to meet the parents of all these kids that we fell in love with. And then there came this point where the parents were saying, I want some of what they're, what are you doing to my kids? I want some of that too. And I think that was the moment that I realized that, wow, the parent, they weren't saying this out loud, but they were asking to be seen in the same way that we were seeing their kids. And that was the moment that I thought, maybe we need to work more with the parents right now than with the teens, because it just, we could do both. But I'm just saying, at that moment, I was like, wow, this is the thing that I'm thinking we're working with teens to change their parents' generation, but their parents are also willing to see themselves too. And I think it was just eye-opening for me. And that was when I realized we got to do more. We got to do more.
It's incredible. And I'll just say that you have impacted the Jewish community to a degree that I don't think it's interesting. I had a conversation with somebody a few weeks ago about you and about the couples course, actually. And I was saying, you don't understand, Pam Dunn has done a tremendous amount for the Jewish community. She's soon going to be a Jewish household name. You don't understand.
This redheaded Irish girl.
Exactly. It's just going to be this is, the amount of healing that this woman has done for the Jewish community. Just haven't, there is a lot of healing going on, from people in the Jewish community, and there's tremendous amount of talent and knowledge and experience and wisdom. But then, comes Pam Dunn, who's not Jewish, coming in and helping Jewish families. It's whoa. And I can't wait for the Jewish world to acknowledge you.
I love that. It seems kind of funny. And what's really funny is that if you would have told me, 20 whatever years ago, 23 years ago, that this is what I was up to, I would be like, what are you talking about? But the thing is that there's just something about following that feeling that I feel like sometimes like for whatever reason, I've been offered this opportunity and I'm taking it. And it surprises me sometimes even how immersed I am and how, I've been on the verge of tears since we started talking. And that, like that's how heart-opening it is for me. That, all this, I think all of my life I have felt like I don't fit in places and that I'm different. And yet I found a place where I'm so different and I so don't fit in, but I feel like I belong here.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to talk about what does it mean to acknowledge who you are, and I want to get into that. You did mention like some aspects to it. I guess the first thing is like, are there patterns that you're recognizing in the work that you're doing? I think specifically with the Jewish community, that it seems like it just keeps coming back and coming back. Not necessarily to one thing, but a few things. Like, is there something like that you can name?
Yeah, I think the first one that comes to mind is the internal pressure to have to be like everything to everybody. That I don't know any other way to describe it, but it's this pressure that, I can't relax or rest in who I am. I have to be something for, I have to succeed here. I have to be really good here. I have to, no matter what it is. Like, I don't even want to name that I've seen, but it's like, it can be in school, in the family, in their work, in their community. Like it's such a community and centered environment, but there's this underlying pressure to be something more than what you're at, even where you are.
It's so interesting you're talking about that specifically, because there is almost philosophy in, again, when I say Jewish community, I'm talking about like, I guess, modern Orthodox to the right.
Okay.
I would say, like, so yeshiva backgrounds, Hasidic backgrounds, very to ultra religious to ultra Orthodox. There is a philosophy that like the Jewish community tries to achieve more. We're always trying to gut more, the best of this, the best of that. Like whatever it is, like there's always like got to do better. Like there's also the concept of if you're staying still, then you're moving downward. There's that concept as well. So it's interesting that you're bringing this up. In what way does like that? First of all, it just sounds like it's a helpful thing to like always be growing, right? Don't you always want to be growing? Don't you always want to be getting better? So then it's like, why are you saying that like that's something that is something to be worked on?
Well, the thing that I would say about that is that, yes, absolutely. It's always great to be growing and, becoming more and more the best version of yourself. And at the same time, I think when there's a striving for that, there's never an acknowledgement of where I am currently and what it's taken for me to get there. And so you don't develop or acknowledge like the character you had to develop to get from here to there, even though you want to go further. And that if you take the time to start acknowledging yourself for what you've done, the work that you had to do, the things you had to let go of, to learn, to heal in order to get where you are, it is something that really people don't understand, that it creates an inner strength and a resolve and a confidence that it says, I can go further than this, rather than just doing it because this is what I'm told to do. I think you miss out on the sense of fulfillment, maybe. Does that feel.
What is looking at your present situation and acknowledging yourself? What does that look like?
It looks like, like let's say I just worked really hard to, accomplish a task. Like I worked really hard to make sure I could do podcasts, or I really worked hard to make sure that I could create this program. And that as soon as you get there and you create the program, you're on to the next thing. Yeah, but what about this? What about this next thing? Or looking at, but it wasn't that great. Why don't I fix this and fix that? Which are all important things. I'm not saying that you don't want to do that. But what is often left out is, okay, let me just stop for a moment and reflect on, like this was a big deal. I had to earn extra money. I had to, pinch here and save there. I had to really let go of my pride in this area because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And I felt like an imposter the whole time, but I still went for it. Like those are all things that take certain qualities, and that's what I mean. Like, I think that that's what heals the Holocaust trauma, is because those are the things that you weren't allowed to be recognized for.
Do you think it's like something to do with our lifestyle that doesn't allow us to like take a break for a second?
I think that it's, I'll say it this way. Trauma shows up as a response, not as like a reenactment. So I would imagine that, my thought is that a lot of responses of this drive, is driven from generational trauma of, like, I in order to survive, I have to do this or I have to do that. Like there's a drive to survive. And that drive to survive is what's in your cells, in our, I'll say our, because I have some version of that. But the thing is that drive is still there, but not a consciousness about where it's coming from. So when you have a drive, it's really important. It's really vital. But where are you coming from and what is that drive toward? Does that make sense?
What did you just say about trauma? I missed that.
That the way that I look at, like what is a generational trauma, how it's showing up in people, is that it isn't showing up like we're reenacting trauma, actual trauma. It shows up as a response. So if you study, or look at people that have, like, for example, the Jewish population, they, you can just imagine given what they went through, you can imagine all of the things, how it would show up today. So it would show up today in, I've got to perform, I have to do okay, I have to survive. There's a tone of desperation or survival attached to it. Hopefully you can hear it in my tone, that's kind of, and I think that comes from a generational, because if I ask you, do you feel like you're in survival right now? Most people would be like, no, I'm just trying to get something done. But what's happening on a feeling level is that it feels like survival. Like if I don't do this. So that's where we have to slow it all down and remember this is where you are now. This is who you are now.
Do you think it's interesting you're talking about it in the past, like a generational trauma from the past? Do you think there is also an aspect of like future being, let's say, anxious about the future? Do you think there's a part of that that's in this whole like almost like it's a survival mode for ambition. It's like an ambitious survival mode.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you think that future anxiety is coming from, or does that look like?
Well, I think that there's a desperation or a fear that even how far into the future will I get to be? So the thing is that I have to make it happen now because I don't know what my future looks like. And I could see where that would happen there. Like if you think about, in Bessel van der Kolk's book, he talks about, in our cells, our generations. He talks about going back 16 generations. So in our cells, we're going to react in certain ways that we aren't even aware of. And so it's about becoming more aware of, okay, I feel like I'm a little overzealous about, this project that I'm on. Why am I so desperate about completing it? And just slowing down enough to say, how do I want to complete this project? Where does it fit for me? And that's what I mean about really returning to yourself.
It's interesting when you say, like, how does it fit for me? And I think this goes a lot with a lot of what happens in the courses. There's a language that has to do with how does this work for me? And whenever that sort of language is happening, like let's say language like my truth, language like, looking at, healing yourself before like healing others or stuff like that. There's always like a little thing in me that goes like how can you do that? Like, how can you do that? Like, what about everyone? What about all the people you're responsible for? If you're just gonna like do whatever you want, then your family's gonna fall apart. You can't just like drop your responsibility. So, can you explain that a little bit? Like when we're talking about taking care of myself, how do I do that without dropping my responsibility?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think what I want to acknowledge first is one of the things I love so much about the Jewish community that you don't. I don't want to criticize other areas, but I see it so profoundly, and that is the dedication and the commitment to family and community. That even the fact that, like that's what you're thinking about, that's not the norm a lot of times. The norm is that people are more focused on themselves. And what you're talking about is being so much like over-focused on everybody else and not focused on you. And so I think that this is the thing that I want to say is you don't have to work on, because that's natural and innate, right, is to include your family, include your community. And what you want to work on is putting yourself as part of that as well. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does make sense, but let's say I come to a course and I conclude that what I want to do is make a podcast, right? Mm-hmm. But like making a podcast is going to take hours of work, and it's going to take time from taking care of my family. So how does that work, that you take care of yourself and what you want to do, but then also take care of your family?
Well, I think that you have to include your family in the negotiation and the conversation about what you want to do. But I think what you're speaking to is even probably a new sense, is that I want to do this. Like this is important to me. That is even a new concept, because you're always looking outward for what does my family need. And so I think that you want to begin to understand that you're not going to be exclusive of your family. You're going to include them. And there's a way to have both. It's just about figuring that out together.
Well, let's just adjust a little bit. Can you turn your chair a little more outward? Yeah. And just as much as possible, like not talk right into the mic,
okay.
But like
is
a little
this
closer.
Okay?
Yeah, should be fine.
Okay.
Okay, so let's move to another like pattern that you've seen. Can you note it like another thing that you've seen in the Jewish community?
Let's see. Well, I think, I'll say two things. A low sense of self, like low self-esteem, and an immense amount of guilt. So those are two things that I think are patterns that I've noticed that people have to work through.
Do you think low self-esteem is attached to like the thing we were talking about before, about like not knowing what you want as a person?
Yeah.
But like, could you actually like, what is low self-esteem? What does that look like? How does that manifest? And also like, let's say in the Jewish community, where does that come from?
I'm not sure where all that comes from, but when I say low self-esteem, I think that there's a greater focus on what's wrong with me rather than what's right with me. And even using what's wrong with me as a motivation to change instead of, where do I want to go in order to change? So I see those two things working together.
I could see somebody saying that like, there's no practical use in saying what's right with me because it doesn't get me to do anything. If I say what's wrong with me, then okay, now I have a mission to fix what's wrong with me. If I say what's right with me, there's no mission. It's just I'm at the end goal. I'm at the end.
Yeah, the challenge with what you're saying is that you may, of course, do the work, motivate yourself through fear, or lack. You're going to do the work. But what you're not going to experience is the fulfillment from doing that. You're not going to stop long enough, to say, wow, I got here. I was really working on, developing my character so I was on time more, for example. And you won't stop long enough to say, I did a great job at that, and I worked really hard. Instead, you're going to just be, okay, what's wrong with me now? And I got to fix that. And the thing is that way of being doesn't develop an inner confidence or a strong sense of self. It just keeps us striving for being better and better and better.
And like the other thing that you said, which was, you said low self-esteem, and the other one was
Guilt.
Guilt. Can you like talk about what does that look like?
Yeah, I think that, this happens in a lot of communities, but I think that guilt is something that, maybe if we refer to Holocaust, the survivor guilt that happened from that, but also the guilt that if I feel guilty, then I'm taking responsibility. Like when you're in a situation where you're faced with, in the Holocaust, you're not actually responsible for what's going on at all, and yet you are a victim of it. And at the same time, you want to do something different about it. The only thing that you know to do, that is like, I just feel guilty that I can't do anything about this.
When you say do anything about it, what is that?
That means like, change what's happening. Because you can't. But guilt is something that, I'm sure there was no other means, nothing. I mean, I understand where the guilt comes from. But remember, if it's still in ourselves, then any time that we feel like we're going to do something that we've wanted to do, or we want to do something, or, we feel bad about something, then in ourselves is guilt. And so guilt will first surface. And we pay attention to that as if that's the thing we have to work on, when that's actually the thing we have to let go of.
It's interesting because what you're saying, because let's say a person's in the Holocaust, there's nothing they could do. So why wouldn't they say, there's nothing I can do, therefore I'm free of responsibility of doing something? It's almost like they take the opposite approach. That there's nothing to do, but now I feel guilty for not taking the responsibility for this thing I have no control over.
Well, it's quite simply because of the level of care and love that they have for each other and their people. Like, that's the thing that is so profound for me in the Jewish community, is that there's a cohesiveness and a looking out for one another and a care for one another that you don't find in other communities. You may find in very small you may find it in a family unit, but you don't find in a whole community like you do here. And I think that the Holocaust even anchored that in more. And I think that I live for the day that they recognize that that's who they are, like the depth of love and care for each other, instead of feeling bad for each other.
It's amazing, Pam, because you're saying these concepts, and they're like super Jewish concepts. This episode is sponsored by Your Infinite Life Training and Coaching Company. Your Infinite Life Training and Coaching Company is a company that's focused on revealing the infinite side of you within your finite self. Your Infinite Life and Training Company is headed by Pam Dunn, and she has many coaches that work with her. The mission of Your Infinite Life is to help people discover and honor their magnificent self. I have been involved with Your Infinite Life through Pam Dunn since 2022, and the amount of learning I've done about myself, to grow confidence within myself, to really be in touch with my feelings, and to be able to be vulnerable, to be able to really be in touch with who I truly am, has done a tremendous amount of healing for me in my life. I implore you, check them out, yourinfinitelifeonline.com, and see what they can offer you. Consider joining the Your Infinite Life Learning Journey membership program to find inspiration, structure, and accountability on a monthly basis for you. And now, on with the show. Like, for example, there's like this concept that Mashiach will come once there's an achdus, which I think literally means brotherhood or a oneness, echad, which is a oneness, but like Achenu, Kol Beis Yisrael, like the whole, all the Jews will be brothers with each other. And like when this happens, when there's this oneness, then the Mashiach will come. And like it's almost like Mashiach's waiting for this to happen. And just like a part of that is because when the second temple was destroyed, the reason that's given is because there was a what's called sinas chinam, which literally translates as like a baseless, it literally means free hatred, but it means like a baseless hatred. That it almost like there was this just hating of one another for no particular reason. It's just hating. So the only way to remedy that is with this achdus, with this oneness, with all of us together. So you touched on that, but then also you touched on this idea of like the Holocaust bringing, like almost anchoring the fact that like we're looking out for each other even more. And there's this concept, and you can tell me what you think of this, that it's almost like God has to remind us that we're all one every once in a while. And that's why these terrible things happen, because when this terrible thing happens, that's when everyone comes back together. So for example, I remember after October 7th, like it was palpable how much love there was between Jews of all different backgrounds and all different types. And it was like, there was just so much connection after this terrible tragedy. I guess like my question for you would be like, do you think that there's a way that can happen without tragedy happening?
Yeah, that's my hope.
Can you think
my
of
dream.
Can you think of a way that can happen?
I do. I think that the actual acknowledgement of how cohesive and caring each of you are individually and collectively for one another is what it will take. You know, that I think that there's a willingness to preach about it and talk about it and say how important it is. But when it comes down to asking somebody individually do you feel connected? Are you seeing, who you are in this community? There's not a willingness to really see that, yeah, I love this. I love my family. I love my community. Like there's a missing piece of owning it. That this is what I'm up to in the world. I'm up to creating community. I'm up to growing together with these people in my life. I mean, that's what community is. So I think that there's just I'm not going to say an unwillingness, but even an unknowing there has to be a self-acknowledgement and ownership of that.
Because it's interesting, because before we were talking about in the Jewish community, there being like this outwardly focus, not on the self, but like on everyone else, on the community, on the family, and like almost like how to acknowledge oneself. But now you're talking about that like inter-acknowledgement between people. Mm-hmm. So it's like almost at the same time. Not only are you acknowledging yourself, you're also acknowledging your brother for being your brother. Mm-hmm. And like that happening. It's fascinating. It's like it's two sides of it.
I think so. I think that sometimes, a fish doesn't know it needs water until it's out of water. Until it's out of the water. And I think that in the Jewish community that I've been immersed in is that you all do community so beautifully, but it's almost like you're oblivious to it. And because like that's how you do things. That's how we do things here. and that's great. Like I love that innate, tendency. And what's going to change the world is people that recognize that we come together in love and care and growing together, learning together, and we're not doing that to be better than each other. We're doing that to be who we were meant to be in the world.
So just on the record, Pam's understanding and translation of Achdus, of this oneness, is the acknowledgement that we are taking care of each other as a people. Mm-hmm. Okay.
You are. And can you, like, even as you say it, is there a different feeling for you, in saying it that way, like acknowledging it for yourself personally, that, wow, that's what I'm doing. I am taking care of each other, each of my people in my community.
I guess for me, I've seen that in like a global sense, but not in a personal sense. Like, for example, like I hear a story of a guy getting a flat tire on the road, and like chaver, what chaverim is? Mm-mm. It's like this is just like another example. Yeah. How Hatzalah is.
Yes.
So chaverim is basically they do everything Hatzalah doesn't do. So Hatzalah is like medical emergencies, things like that. Chaverim will like fix your flat tire and help you down the get your groceries or whatever, and like fix your washing machine for people who are in need. It's always the chaverim are always like these guys like 18 to like 24 who like want to have a walkie-talkie on them, want to feel like they're cool like that, and they have like a truck that's full of tools that they'll never use, but like for that one thing they'll have the wrench. So whenever like I hear like a chaverim story of like, a guy was stuck in the road and it was in the middle of nowhere, and a chaverim came from 50 miles away to fix it, to help. So the line that goes out is Mi Kamcha Yisrael, which nation can say that they're like the Jewish nation that helps each other in this sort of fashion, right? But like it was always like global. It was always like, it's not personal to me. It was not like I'm here trying to grow a community for the community. Yeah, for my family, like I want my family to have a thing, but like also like I want this community to grow. I want people to be happy here and to love living here. And that's a that's because I want people, other Jewish people to be, living a good life. And that's like what you're saying, like looking at that and acknowledging that. It's like, yeah, you want other Jews to do well. Mm-hmm. And that's, I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a heart-opening observation. It really is. I mean, in my world, we have AAA. They don't care that much about me, but I think if I got a flat tire somewhere in this community, I'd call you and you'd have me taken care of in minutes. And the thing that's different is that you're not doing that. Like, this is the part of the acknowledgement that I don't think happens. It might look like you're doing that just because that's what we do here, but there's something else that drives that. There's a depth of care and consideration and thoughtfulness that it isn't everywhere. And that to start, I don't know, broadcasting that, like, this could potentially be a model for what the world needs.
The light unto the nations.
Yeah.
If you will.
If you will.
So let's get a little out of the philosophical for a second.
Okay, good.
How in the world did a redheaded Irish girl end up in this situation?
It's a really great question. She wonders the same thing sometimes. Well, I was immersed in the professional and personal development field and happened to be at a course teaching and met a rabbi. And
What was his name?
His name was Rabbi Shimmy Trencher, and he was interested in, he worked at a high school, and he loved the work that we did, and he started explaining to me how it follows along the lines of the Torah, which I had no idea. So he said that I would love for teens to get this work, and I loved, at the time, that was my passion, working with teens. And so we just started doing the course for teens. And I began to learn along the way all the things I didn't know about being, not being Jewish. And I loved it. I just fell in love with how cohesive and community focused they were. I love community.
So which course did you do for the teens?
It was similar. It was the Discover Magnificence course, but it was catered for teens. So it just meant that we dealt with teen issues.
So for those just who don't know, Discover Magnificence course, like what is that course?
It's a weekend intensive and designed to assist you to discover, honor, and express your magnificence.
Discover, honor?
Honor your magnificence, discover your magnificence, honor that magnificence, and then express that magnificence. And so, I think the place that we really become in alignment is that when we go deeper into looking at what magnificence is, meaning that it's more than just your greatness. It's that moment of, really being angry with somebody, but instead of lashing out, you treat them with firm kindness. And that takes growth and development in order to be able to do that. So that's part of what magnificence is. Magnificence is living a life of being and learning, which is, in my opinion, Jewish philosophy. So that fits along that, like really learning to listen to yourself, to feel what you're feeling. I think that that's probably something that has been really helpful that our work has brought to the Jewish community, is to learn how to feel your feelings and not just push them away or talk them away or pretend like they're not there, but to really feel them, because that's where the depth of the healing lies.
So can you actually tell me even a personal story of, instead of lashing out, reacting with firm kindness?
Yeah. So I have 3 sons, and they were all teenagers together. And I went out for an evening with friends. They were old enough to stay home by themselves, and they promised me that they would behave and not fight. And so I went with a friend to another friend's house for dinner. It wasn't that far away. But I was probably at the house for, we hadn't eaten dinner yet. And I got a phone call, and it was chaotic. My oldest son was outside and felt like he needed to call the police because his brother was chasing him around with a butcher knife. And I don't know if any of you have ever had that happen, but I have. So I just said, I was really mad. I was really mad because my evening was done. I knew I had to go home. And so I said, I'm on my way. And I also did say, if you feel like you need to call the police, go ahead and call the police. I'll be there soon. And you could even hear in my tone, like I was just so discouraged by. And on the way home, I was like it took me 15 minutes. The first 5 to 10 minutes, I was just fueling my anger about how dare they ruin my night, and can't they just go one night without fighting a few hours? I was really mad. And then I sort of got a grip on myself. Since I do this work, sometimes I need to actually practice it. So I figured I should start practicing what I teach. And I started like just focusing on, okay, these are my kids. I love them. I love them. And I'm going to focus on that for the next 3 minutes before I get home. And so, when I walked in the door, I remembered I loved them, but at the same time, it was not okay what happened. And so, I was able to sit them down and have a conversation about, with firm kindness, without having to call them names or get mad at all the things I was doing on the, in my privacy. But I was able to have a conversation with them about their behavior and what went on and what triggered it and how could they do it different next time. So it was a learning opportunity rather than a punishing event because they ruined my night. So that's what I mean by firm kindness, or taking something rather than lashing out.
I hear that. But in a situation where the response is going to come much quicker, like if you were there when this was happening, then what can someone do to, you're going to be very angry. You're going to want to lash out. What could someone do?
I think that, first of all, what we teach in the courses is that you got to first get proactive about feeling those feelings, like understanding that mad is simply a feeling. That's all it is. Just take it down to that level. It's a feeling, it's energy, let it move through your body. And then when you let yourself feel that feeling, then you're more level-headed. You're not coming from the feeling, you're actually coming from the solution of what you want to do about the situation. So I think, to your point, when you first start out wanting to not lash out and do firm kindness, you're going to have to first practice feeling your feelings. And then the other thing I always say is that you can stop lashing out at any moment. You can all of a sudden realize, okay, I'm lashing out. Let me stop and take a breath and remember who's standing in front of me, who I'm angry with.
That's not overnight.
No, it's not. And I think that's the key too, is that to remember it's not overnight, like that pressure. So that's one of the things, like, I always feel like I'm saying in a course, especially in the Jewish community, is that it's practice. You just got to practice, because you give a great idea and all of a sudden, if the need for perfection or to get that down the first time is there, that pressure. And so, it's about reminding people that, no, it's a practice. It's not a pressure to be perfect. It's a practice.
Why do you think anger is seen as this bad thing?
Well, if you consider what anger has done to a lot of people, that people have have blamed their anger for the way that they behave. So it becomes that the anger is what's causing people to shoot people or, label people like they did the Jews. That's blaming it on the anger. The anger isn't the problem. The problem is the character of that person, and that they haven't developed the character to recognize that their anger is just a feeling, and that, they can ask for what they want. They can even probably get what they want, but not coming from anger.
Yeah, it's like there are titles like angry kid, angry guy, There's like a title like that. And what would you say is like a better way to understand that title? Like, it's a terrible thing, but when a student, shoots kids in a school, like, there's like this concept of like, yeah, he was just an angry kid.
Right.
Well, how would you say?
Well, it's part of what my nonprofit was built on was school shootings. But the thing that I would say is that that child has never been really listened to or allowed to feel or be heard and understood for what's causing them to feel angry. And that if that opportunity is given, then children, especially children and teenagers, they're quick. They'll understand what their anger is and what drives it, and they'll start catching it sooner.
So what you're saying now, I think, will perk a lot of ears, because there is a concept that's spoken about, just evil. Is this kid not just? Is this just not evil? Evil that does this?
Well, I don't believe anyone is born evil. But I do think that people do. There is evil. I'm going to say that there is evil, and that there are people who are evil. And I also believe that there's capacity for change. Like if somebody has gone to the root of their evil, no, maybe not. And we need to protect ourselves from that evil person. But to label a child as evil is unfair without giving them a chance. That just because we're scared of the anger that they're projecting or whatever it is that they're doing, there is help out there for people and for kids that are operating that way. We don't know why, but I think that there's assistance out there, and that everybody should be given a chance.
Okay. To go back to a little bit of a lighter topic.
Okay.
To get off of that for a second. So when you started teaching the teenagers in Rabbi Shimmy Trencher's school, was there? It's interesting. I'm going to ask this question, but I'm going to ask it in two ways. First of all, was there pushback to you to the what you were teaching, the content of what you were teaching?
No, never. I've never gotten pushback on what we're teaching. Like I've had to adjust different ways that I teach or how I, say something to make it more understandable, actually. But no, I've never gotten pushback. Which is even, like the fact that you asked that, I think it's fascinating. Yeah. I've never gotten pushback.
Meaning like from parents or faculty or...
Yeah, maybe.
And I do want to ask this question.
I may not have gotten it, but maybe Rabbi Trencher may have. And I think that he could answer that.
And I do want to ask this question a little different way, because I've been in a course room, and in a course room, there is pushback, but it's not in the way that we're describing now.
Yeah.
So can you describe, what is that pushback?
Yeah, the pushback is just simply, how everybody has their own personal private logic of the way that they look at things and view the world and themselves. And so the pushback, because what we're bringing up, sort of, I'll say, messes with or, confuses that private logic, that's the pushback. The pushback is that, wait a minute, I'm feeling challenged by what I thought was true or what I believed, and you're offering an opportunity. Now, we're not trying to change your beliefs, but unless you want them to change, but we're giving you an opportunity to look at it from a different perspective.
Can you note any, again, like that pattern in the Jewish community of concepts that were pushed back on?
Gosh, I don't know. Do you know any?
Well, I think anger is one.
Okay.
The idea that anger is,
Okay,
is
that's
not
true.
anger is not a bad thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Or sadness is not something that you should try to avoid.
Yeah, probably
don't be sad.
feelings.
Yeah.
Feelings overall, I would think, yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Well, generationally, I mean, there was no permission to feel. The need for survival caused, in order to survive, you actually had to shut that down. So I think that it's about reopening up that avenue now that, there is more safety in the world.
All right. I have, my wife and I have discussed the idea of feeling is a luxury. And I think it's a little bit of what you're saying.
Yeah.
When you're surviving, there's no ability, there's no chance to feel.
Right.
If you're feeling, it means you're in a safe place. You're not running to survive.
That's so true. So true.
So, I mean, with that, even though there is anti-Semitism, there is challenges that are happening in the world. What do you think is blocking that acknowledgement that hey, you can feel, it's okay to feel?
The blocking it is the trauma response, that you automatically go into that survival mode, and I think what is needed in folks that are going through that is a lot of support to remind them that no, right here, right now, you're safe, and the only way that you're going to really be able to be safer emotionally is to feel. That learning how to, even though it is a luxury at times, learning how to feel is what creates emotional safety.
So can you continue the story? So Shimmy Trencher brings you to the school. You start doing courses with these kids. Adults start asking for it. Can you continue from there? What happened?
Yeah, so we were doing probably 4 or 5 courses a year. And, because of the type of course it is, we only have 12 students. But we also have about 25 to 30 assistants. So the benefit of that is that you go through the course as a student, and you learn, you come for your own reason, and then you can keep coming back as an assistant, and that provides ongoing learning. So ongoing work so if you open up around how to feel, then you have a place where you can continue to learn how to feel and practice that. So we did that for years, and then they decided, Shimmy was getting new jobs, doing something different, so it was no longer, he was no longer able to devote the time, and so I reached out to a few people that were in that community already, and said, and I said to the community, I still want to do this. And so then a handful of people stepped forth, And so we're going like crazy again.
It truly is amazing. And I think there is so much more to talk about. I do want to just cut it here, just because it is getting later. You have a flight to catch. I want to thank you. Really, I want to thank you. You're bringing us closer to redemption as a people.
Wow.
And I appreciate that.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me here. But I feel very blessed to be a part of this community and this redemption process. You know, I mean, really blessed. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Holy